Okay. That's the difference between Monday and Thursdays. But no long tachna, no Torah reading. I actually get to get here not out of breath. Okay. Excuse me. The other day, just as to segue into our topics and learning, I got a call the other day at night from somebody who said they were learning the Gemara on their own, and they didn't understand certain items, and they started asking me questions. I wound up giving 45-minute shiur. So, as we'll see today, especially when we start the new parak, okay, some of the same basic questions are still being discussed, but in other details. Okay. So we'll be getting to that shortly. But I'm going to start off with our sponsors. A Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Konigsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Konigsberg, Shimon Ruvain ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissan Hara, Nissan ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, excuse me, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Peres, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. A Month of Learning by Charlie Gelfenstein, in memory of his mother, Dacia Gittel bas Meir Halevi, and his father, Meir ben Yaakov. Today, also a day of learning plus Suda Shlishit Fund by Carol and Paul Schwartz, in memory of her father, Yaakov Yitzchak ben Ze'ev. Today, also a day of learning by Zahava Baum, in memory of her husband, Yosef ben Ruvain, by Gail and Milton Meller, in memory of his sister, Brindle bas Aryeh Leib. And starting tonight and tomorrow, a day of learning by Elaine and Harold Rinn, in memory of her father, Avram ben David, and by Toby and Gary Greenstein, in memory of her mother, Sarah bat Ephraim HaKohen. May the Neshamas have an aliyah, Kranker Afia, Velti Yeshua Shem Matliya, and L'chol B'nai Israel, a good gebenched yar. Okay. Just one other reminder, a couple more guys. Just remember we changed the clocks this weekend. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. It doesn't mean just don't want you to get onto the Gemara Shir an hour earlier, right? Next on Sunday morning, okay? Because you'll then be lonesome, okay? All right. I want to point out that as we finish this parak, we come back to briefly analyzing the statement that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, okay? And then that will lead us clearly towards the end of the parak. We saw, as we turned the Amud, that there was this issue, right? Identifying a courtyard that was located between two different alleyways, and the question of putting right, a lechi or a korah in one does not guarantee, okay, because people could use the other. And so therefore the Gemara ended up, right, with Rav Shizbi Amar Rav Chisda, Zot Omeret Chalukina Lav Chavei Rav Shel Rabbi Yehuda. He's claiming that explanation that was given, that Rabbi Yehuda basically explained his colleagues, was not the case, okay? That sometimes they did challenge him. And therefore the Gemara went on the top of Pei Bet, our daf for today, to say, Gavra agavra karamit. You seem to present a contradiction of one person versus another person. Mar savar plige or mar savar lo plige. One master felt they argued, of the rabbis, right? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Shmuel, and one felt they did not. Now, coming back to where we left off yesterday, second line on Pei Bet Amud Aleph. Gufa, let's examine the statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi in more detail. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kol makom she'amar Rabbi Yehuda, Eimatai ubameh. Any place where Rabbi Yehuda includes the statement, Eimatai, at what point, let's say, or when, and bameh, regarding what? B'mishnatenu, in our Mishnah, Eino ela lefaresh divrei chachamim, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It comes to explain and not necessarily challenge his colleagues. The Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan says differently. Ematai lefaresh, that when he says when, that comes to explain, okay? An earlier statement, okay? Ubameh lechlok. But when he says what, okay, that, however, means a challenge. Ve'ematai lefareshu, and you claim that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says the word ematai, and does Rabbi Yochanan, that comes as a perush, v'hatnan. But here we're also taught in another Mishnah, ve'elu hein hapsulim, and these are the individuals, we say, who are going to be disqualified for participating as witnesses. Hamesachek b'kubia, one who plays dice. Umalveh b'ribit, okay, or one who loans money for interest. Umafrichei yonim, and one who engages in pigeon racing. V'sochrei shvi'it, and also those individuals who become involved in merchandising produce that during the Shvit, during the sabbatical year. Now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ematai, so now in response to that Mishnah, okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ematai, when, right? Bisman she'ein lo omanut elahi. Okay, they are prohibited from being witnesses if they have no other profession than that one. Aval yesh lo omanut shalohi, okay, harei zeh kasher. But if he has another alternative profession by which he is gainfully, let's say, employed, right, as opposed to his indulging in these other activities as a, let's call it the hobby or a sideline, right? Rabbi Yehuda is saying that he is valid as a witness, which does certainly seem to be a challenge to the Chachamim, and at the same time, by you pointing out the word ematai, a challenge to what, okay, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan said. Vatani ala bebraita. Now, it was taught about this in a braita. V'chachamim omrim bein she'ein lo amanut elahi uvein sheyesh lo amanut shelohi. Harei ze pasul. But the sages felt whether the individual has an alternate profession or if they don't have an alternate profession, one who indulged in any one of these activities is no longer valid for testimony because the activities were considered such that it was almost like robbery, right? That they were acquiring items, property, money, whatever, in a unscrupulous, let's say, manner. Okay? Hahi the Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Tarfon. No, the Gemara says in this case, okay, the sages were pointing out that this was Rabbi Yehuda's statement in the name of Rabbi Tarfon. The Tanya is taught elsewhere in a Braita. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon. In the name of Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yehuda said, Le'olam ein echad mehem nazir, lafi she'ein nazirut ela lahafla'ah. Okay, that if two individuals are involved in some sort of a bet, let's say, that, and the result is that one of them is going to determine that he would become the loser, let's say, would become a Nazir. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, is saying that's not valid because the acceptance of Nazirut is reliant on some sort of clear pronouncement, clear statement. Okay? Alma, kevan de misvekale. So we go on and say, since there's a doubt here, right? I nazir, ilo nazirhu. We don't know for sure then if he is clearly going to be considered a Nazareth or not, right? Lo mish'abid nafshe. We don't obligate him, we don't force him, okay, to become a Nazir out of doubt. Hachanami, here too he's saying, kevan de lo yada ikane ilo kane, since we don't know for sure, okay, whether the person has acquired those winnings through those activities, dice playing, racing pigeons, and so on, or whether he did not really acquire the ownership, okay, did not really gain it properly, acquire the winnings, lo gamar umikna, okay? We say that we do not come to the conclusion that he has rightful ownership, okay, that he has correctly gained ownership from it, okay? And therefore, hadran alach chalo. We finished that parak. Okay, when we go into now the new parak, right, we have 2 or 3 items to think about. Number one, it's very clear that the Gemara up to now has been focusing on Eruv Chatzerot, okay, particularly if they can be joined as a single, 2 Chatzerot as a single one, or have to have separate Eruvei Chatzerot, okay? Let's assume for the moment, take a good example that the Gemara is going to get us into, that between the 2 courtyards, there's a well, a cistern, okay? Now, to whom does that belong? Who has the right to take water from that cistern? Okay? Well, the Gemara has to tell us it's very difficult to draw some sort of a partition in that cistern, and so maybe we will give that water rights to the residents in the courtyard that have easier access to it, okay? And maybe they won't need a Eruv Chatzerot to get that water and carry it through their courtyard. But if the other courtyard, okay, on the other side of the cistern, okay, maybe they will require an Eruv Chetzeros. Okay? But that may not be the only, excuse me, example, right? So as we start, okay, this new parak, we'll see questions like this, right? And so Gemara starts off the Mishnah. Keitzad mishtatfin betchumin. How do we see that residents participate, join in a communal Eruv Tchumin, right? Maniach et chavit. We say here that they place a barrel, va'omer, and they say, Harei zeh lekol b'nei iri. This is for all the residents of my, let's say, town. Okay? Lekol mi sheyilech lebeit ha'evel. For anyone who has to go to a house of mourning, okay, beyond the Tchum Shabbat, or lebeit hamishte, or one who has to go, okay, to a wedding banquet that may be beyond the existing Eruv. And so therefore, by increasing and putting that chavit at the end, let's say, or close to the end of that 2,000 amma of that town, remember they have an additional 2,000 amma by which they can travel. The kol shekibel alav mi ba'od yom mutar, and anyone who accepts this Erev Tchumin while it is still daylight, in other words, Friday afternoon, mutar is permitted to use it, right? Mishetechshach. However, if once it gets dark, asur, they are prohibited from using it. Why? She'ein ma'arvin mishetechshach, says the Mishnah. Okay, because we cannot make an eruv after it gets dark. Now, the Gemara raises a significant question. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Ein ma'arvin ela ledavar mitzvah. Okay, our Mishnah referred to going to a house of Avel or a mishteh, a wedding. That would seem to imply, says Rav Yosef, that the only purpose, okay, or the main purpose of having an Eruv Tchumin is to allow one to perform and do something that is mitzvah-oriented. Ma'ik mashmala. Why then do we have to learn this? What is it teaching us? Tanina, didn't we learn this already? L'chol mi sheyilech lebeit ha'evel u'lebeit ha'mishteh. It specifically says to one who goes to a house of mourning or to a location for a wedding celebration. Mahu detema. Okay, so what then we say that it's telling us? Orcha de milta katani. It's basically telling us the normal behavior, routine things that are of the purpose of an Eruv. Okay? Kamashmala. That's what it's coming to teach us. Therefore, according to Rav Yosef, Eruv Tchumim is primarily and only restricted to mitzvah-oriented items. Okay? Therefore, l'kol shekibel alav mi ba'od yom, when our Mishnah then goes on to say if one accepts it during the day, shamat mina ein breira. We learn from this then that there is no retroactive clarification. Okay? That one can't, let's say, wake up Shabbos morning and say, oh, I understand that there is a Erev Tchumim, okay? I can utilize it to walk beyond the Tchum. The Iyesh Breira, because were there to be retroactive clarification. Tigle milta lemafreya de be'od yom hava nechale. Okay, because then we say what happens. Okay, that right. We would say that the item would be revealed after the start of daybreak, right after daylight, after Friday had completed, and therefore it would be easy for him just to go and walk, right, and right to accept it during the day, rather than to have to accept it on himself still on Friday. Okay, and therefore, all right, as a result, Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, however, okay, look at the language of our text, okay, Hodi Uhu. We say he has to inform him. In other words, for the person to be able to benefit from the Tchum Shabbos, okay, he must be aware of it while it's still on Friday before Shabbat. V'lo hi'di'uhu katani. Okay, and then it also says that if he, right, if the makers of the info did not inform him, okay, implying that there's a difference, okay, that therefore, as a result, that person, if he was not aware, cannot benefit from it. Now, Amar Rav Asi. Rav Asi is going to continue with this issue of Eruv, but he's bothered by the topic of who then can benefit really from this Eruv. Okay? And so he says, Amav Rav Asi, Katan ben Sheish Yotzei be'eruv imo. A child of 6 years old may utilize the Eruv of his mother. Okay? Now, this seems to be a statement out of, so to speak, nowhere, I want to say. But I'm going to give you the following idea based on Art Scroll and Koren, that let's assume both the father and the mother each made an Eruv. The father made the Eruv in one direction, let's say going north, and the mother made the Eruv in the other direction, going south. Okay? Rav Asi is saying that a child as old as 6, excuse me, who normally we might consider no longer an infant or a toddler, can still go with them, use the mother's and benefit from the mother's Eruv. However, the Gemara continues with a challenge to that idea. Okay? Meitive. We have a Braita that says, Katan shetzarich le'imo yotzei be'eruv imo. A infant, a child that is reliant, I'm going to say, on his mother, goes out with the Eruv of his mother. V'she'ein tzarich le'imo. And if the child is not still reliant on one's mother, ein yotzei be'eruv imo. He does not go out with the Eruv of his mother. In other words, he can't benefit using that Eruv. Utznan. And we also have another Mishnah, Nami, that says, Gabe Sukkah, in terms of a Sukkah. Ki hai gavna, in a similar manner. Katan she'ein sarich le'imo, chayav b'sukkah. A child that no longer reliant on one's mother is obligated regarding Sukkah. Right? Excuse me, Vahavinan ba, and we said, or we discussed about this, Ve'ezahu katan she'ein tzarich le'imo. What do we mean when we say a child who's no longer reliant on one's mother? Amrei debe Rabbi Yanai, they said in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai, Kol shenifne ve'ein imo mekan chato. Any child who, let's say, goes to the bathroom, right? And the mother no longer needs to wipe him. In other words, a child who is trained. Okay? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, he gives a little different definition. Kol sheni or ve'eno korei ima. He's a child who wakes up in the morning, sorry, and the first thing he calls out is mother. If he doesn't call out for his mother right away, so the Gemara asks, Ima? You think he doesn't call out for his mother? Gedolim nami karu. Even older children tend to call out for their mother sometimes first thing in the morning. Ela ema, I would say, kol sheni or mishnato ve'eno korei ima ima. Okay? But it's a child who, when he immediately wakes up, doesn't start calling repeatedly for his mother, crying for her. The comma, okay? So how old might that child be when we say that he no longer really needs his mother? Kibar arba, kibar chamesh. That could be a child, say, of 4 or a child of 5 years, okay? That child might still need one's mother. But a child of 6, okay, as Rav Asi seemed to indicate, right? That challenges his statement, okay? So let's go over now. Amar Rav Yoshua bered Rav Idi. So Rav Yoshua, the son of Rav Idi, explains and says as follows. Ki ka'amar Rav Asi. When Rav Asi made that statement, Kigon she'irev alav aviv litzafon ve'imo ledarom. That was a situation where his father made an eruv towards the north, and the mother made the eruv for the child for the south, right? And so therefore, what? The afilu bar sheish nami betzavta de ime nechale. Because even a 6-year-old child may be more willing at that point to go along, more comfortable to join the company of his mother. However, the Gemara challenges again. Meitive. What about the following braita? Katan shetzarich le'imo, yotzei be'eruv imo ad ben sheish. A child, okay, who needs the eruv to go with that and benefit from the eruv of his mother is appropriate up to 6 years old. Now that braita certainly contradicts, right? Tiyufta, the Rav Yoshua bar Rav Idi. Okay, that certainly seems to contradict the explanation that he gave to support Rav Asi. And the Gemara then says, Tiyufta, indeed it is a proof text against him. Now the Gemara asks, Lema tiyufte de Rav Asi. Shall we say then that this is also a proof text against Rav Asi? Amalach Rav Asi. Rav Asi, however, could argue, ad va'ad bichlal, that when the Braita says up to 6, it means up to and including. Therefore, his statement would be okay. Now the Gemara asks another shaila. Lema tehave tiyufte the Rav Yanai v'Reish Lakish. Shall we say then that this is a proof text against the 2 of them, right? Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Shlakish. Lo kasha. No, that's not problematic. Ha da'ite avuhe b'mata, ha de lo ite avuhe b'mata. No, we're saying in one case, it's where the father there is in town. In another case, it's where the father is not in town. The implication being a 6-year-old is old enough and would tend to go with the father, okay, as opposed normally if the father's not around, then he would go and benefit from the mothers. Now, let's go on now with a new Braita. Okay? Now, we just said that the parent could make a Eruv for that, let's call it minor child, up to a certain point. And they need not inform the child, okay, that the child can benefit from that Eruv. What about other circumstances, can we say, where the person who makes the Eruv, do they always need to inform the others, okay, that they benefit from the Eruv? Or can they make the Eruv Tchumim without that case? Right? And that's where we're going to pick up the new Braita. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita, Ma'arev Adam al Yedei Beno Ubito Haktanim. That the Braita says that a individual, right, the father, okay, in this case maybe, or a person, can make an Eruv or connect, join with in the Eruv, okay, for their son or daughter who are minors. Al Yadei Avdo V'Shifchato HaKnanim, or do so for his male or female Canaanite servant. Bein L'Da'atam, Bein Shalot L'Da'atam. Whether it's with their knowledge, I'm going to say, or without their knowledge, or with their consent and without their consent. Aval Eino Me'arev Lo Al Yedei Avdo V'Shifchato Ha'ivri. But he cannot join and connect in an Eruv for his Hebrew male or female servants, okay? Right. Or v'lo al yedei bano ubito hagdolim, nor his adult son or daughter, v'lo al yedei ishto, and not for his wife, ela mida'atam, unless it's with their consent. Now, Tanya Idach, we've got another Braita that teaches Lo ye'arev adam al yedei beno ubito hagdolim. This Braita, okay, says that a person may not make an Eruv for their adult son or daughter, okay? Va'al yedei avdo v'shifchato ha'ivrim, or by their male or female Hebrew servants. V'lo al yedei ishto, and not by his wife. Ela mida'atan, unless it's with their consent. Aval ma'arev hu al yedei avdo v'shifchato ha'kana'anim. But he may join them in an Eruv, okay, for his male or female Canaanite servants. Va'al yedei bano ubito ha'ktanim, or for the benefit of his minor son or daughter. Bein l'da'atan, uvein shelo l'da'atan, whether with their consent or without their consent. Mepnei sheyadan ki yado. Why? Because their hand is like his hand. In other words, they are still under his authority. Okay? That's being the case, right? And okay. Now, Tosafot, by the way, in a note in Art Scroll, explains it a little differently, but it's still the same point. V'kulan she'irvu. Okay, and so the Gemara then continues. All right, what happens? V'irev alehem rabban, and we say in any of these situations where they make their own Eruv, ve'irev alehem rabban, and their master, okay, may have made, let's say, a different eruv in a different direction. Yotz'in b'shel rabban, they may use and benefit the eruv made by their master, chutz min ha'isha, with the exception of one's wife, mipnei sheyichola limchot, because she is able to object. Okay? Now, Gemara asks the question, Isha ma'ishna, one's wife, why is that different? How does that different from the others? Let's say from the adult children or from the Hebrew servants. Amar Rabba, called the Damina. Rabba says it's the wife and only any of the others who are similar to her. Okay? In other words, it means also the adult children and the Jewish servants. Amar Mar. However, now, what is this telling us? Our Braita said, Chutz min ha'isha, implying that she is able to challenge, right? Able to object. Tama demache, do we say the issue is because, okay, she is able to object? That's the only reason? Ha stama nafka de ba'ala, which means, okay, if she doesn't object, in other words, if she doesn't verbally say something, okay, she may utilize and go out through the eruv of the husband. Haktane resha elamida'atam. But here it's taught initially at the beginning of the Braita that it says it has to be with their consent. Mai, what are we saying? Lav da amre en? Is it not that she says yes? No, that's not the case. Okay? Mai ela mida'atam. So then what does it mean when we say that it requires their consent? The ishtiku. Okay? It could be that they were silent. And remember, we have a rabbinic chazal, shtika kehoda'a damya. Okay? That silence is sometimes considered like acknowledgement. Okay? So the Gemara then picks up and says, La fuke hecha da amre lo. That comes to tell us that it excludes a situation where they don't specifically say no. Ha v'kulan she'ervu v'irev alehen rabban. But here we've said that if all of them, namely the wife, the Jewish student, the Jewish servants, or the adult children made their own eruv, and v'irev alehem rabban, and the master made, yotzin b'shel rabban, they utilize the eruv of the master, ustamahu, and that seems to be in general the case. Uktani chutz min ha'isha delo nafke. Okay, but then we teach with the exception of the wife who doesn't go out. So in other words, even if she doesn't object, okay, she can't use the husband's eruv. Now, Amar Rabba, says Rabba kevan she'irvu ein lecha michui gadol mizeh. If, however, says Rava, they went ahead and made their own eruv, you do not have an example of objection, of a challenge greater than that. So in other words, that's even stronger than a verbal challenge, all right, a verbal disagreement. And that ends that particular sugya. Okay. we now go to another Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah, however, continues with our discussion of Eruv Chatzerot and Eruv Tchumim, particular, okay, Eruv Tchumim. We said that you have to put the barrel or the container of food, right? So the Gemara, the Mishnah naturally asks, Kama hu shiuro? What is going to be the amount of food necessary to put out, right? Mazon shtei seudot lekol echad ve'echad. There must be enough foodstuffs, okay, so that there's 2 meals worth of food for each individual participating in the tchum. Okay? Now, mezono lechol, velo l'shabbat, divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says it's got to be food that would be eaten on a weekday and not Shabbat. But remember, normally they only ate 2 meals a day in the time of the Gemara. Okay? So it's basic enough for that situation. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, l'Shabbat v'lo l'chol. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, no, there must be enough of 2 meals worth of Shabbos foods, which is more food, v'lo l'chol, and not weekday meals. V'zeh v'zeh mitkavnim lahakel, says the Mishnah. And both this one, namely Rabbi Meir, and this one, Rabbi Yehuda, both of them are of an intention to be lenient. Okay? What do we mean by lenient? Okay? In other words, how much food? Okay? One is going to say weekday meals are smaller. The other says, no, Shabbos meals may be smaller. Why? Because he has more food. Right? Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, mikikar b'pundion. Rabbi Yochanan says that you use bread, and it can be a loaf of bread that is acquired for a coin, a pindayon, and that pindayon is worth enough, mi arba sa'in basela, okay, that where you can buy 4 seah of grain for a single selah, okay? So, and basically, okay, that's, I don't know, 1/48th, let's say, right? Now, Rabbi Shimon Omer, shtei adot l'kikar. Rabbi Shimon disagrees, right? And he says the amount of bread has to be 2 parts, or in other words, 2/3 of a loaf, okay? In this case, right? Mishalosh lakav, where you have 3 are equal to a kav. Now, chetzia l'bayat hamenuga, of which half of that amount, okay, we identify with another law where one would, eating that amount of food in a house that is leprous, okay, would render one's clothes leprous, a tameh, the chatzi chetzia, and even a half of a half, lipsol et hagaviyah, would therefore render the person, okay, tameh. Now, Gemara, v'kama mazon shtei seudo. So how much food do we really say is equivalent for 2 meals? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rab, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, tarte rifta ichrayata. Okay? Basically, he says 2 loaves that are normally farmers. Okay? So I'm going to suggest for the moment that we understand that statement, okay, to be basically like small pitas. Okay, think of that, right? Rav Adabar Ahava Amar Tarte Rifta Nahar Papita. He claims instead that it's 2 loaves of bread as is baked around the area, okay, of the river Papita. Okay, so what okay do we mean by that? Okay, so that's a different size. Maybe that would be, for example, Lafa. If you remember what Lafa is, right? That's a bit bigger. Maybe that's what he's referring to. Okay. Okay. So those some attempt to understand it. Okay. What happens? Amarle Rav Yosef. Okay. So Rav Yosef now talking to the Rav Yosef Berei de Rava, to Rav Yosef the son of Rava. Okay. Avuch keman svarele. Your father, he wants to know, who does he hold by? Okay. Does he hold, okay, right? What was his measurement? Okay. So he answers, Rabbi Meir sevirele. He holds like the view of Rabbi Meir. So Rav Yosef responds, Ananami Rabbi Meir sevirele. He says, I also, okay, accept the view of Rabbi Meir that it's weekday meals, right? The Rabbi Yoshua kasha, because if it were according to Rabbi Yoshua, we would have a problem based on the fact the ha'amre inshe, as people commonly say, Ravcha levasima shechiach, okay, which basically means in colloquial English, there's always room for dessert, okay, right? That's what he's saying. Ravcha levasima shechiach, that sweets or a tasty dish, okay, is always available, right? So you can see that the Gemara has that idea. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. Okay. Now, he's going to cite another text for us. Tana was taught, right? Ukrovim divrehem liot shavim. He says, their views, namely that of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, are really relatively close. Okay. Midami, asks the Gemara. Are they really that case? The Rabbi Yehuda are besu'udata lekava. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you could get 4 meals out of a kav of grain. The Rabbi Shimon, teisha su'udata lekava. According to the size that Rabbi Shimon says, you could get 9 meals out of a kav of grain. Okay. Amar Rav Chisda, tsei mehen shalish lechen vani. Take 1/3 of that for the money that goes to the shopkeeper. That's his profit. Va'akate, and still lamar tisha v'lamar shit. So therefore, if that's the case, this one still has 9, and this one has 6, right? Ela ke'idach. But let's go again, like he said. The Rav Chisda de Amar, say mehen mechze lechen vani. Again, take a portion out as the profit for the storekeeper. Va'akati lamar tisha ulamar timne. So then again, for this one there would be 9, and this one 8. Hainu deka'amar ukrovim divrehem liot shavim. This is why, okay, he said that it's possible that we could see that their two statements are somewhat close. But if that's the case, says the Gemara, kasha de Rav Chisda ad Rav Chisda, then we have a problem of what Rav Chisda said in one place and what he says in the other place. Lo kasha. No, that doesn't have to necessarily be difficult. Why? Ha dekayahiv bal habayit tzivi. In what case we can say that it's when the person who was intending to buy the bread brought the wood for the baker on which to bake the bread. Ha de lo yahiv bal habayit tzivi. Here in the other case, we're saying the purchaser did not bring the wood. So where the purchaser brings the wood, the chenvani can take a lower profit because he doesn't have more expenses. Okay, but where the purchaser did not bring the wood, he has to take a greater profit because he has additional expenses. Okay, let's go over just a little bit to the next Amud, right? Chetzia lebeit hamenuga v'chetzia l'psul et hagvia. Okay, we said that the amount of bread was enough, okay, to in one case render a person who goes into a house of tzarat, render his clothes tameh, and in another case, okay, so if he ate half a loaf, that's the situation. In another case, it would render his body tameh. Okay, so tomorrow's daf is going to just give us a little start on that. Tana. Okay, it was taught again in a Braita. Okay, the chatzi, chatzia, a half of a half of a half. In other words, an eighth. Latame tumat ochlin. That we say is going to render food tame. Right? Vatana didan, and our tana, okay, my tama lo tane tumat ochlin. Then what's the reason that he does not teach the issue in regards to food tuma? Mishum de lo shavu shi'uraihu lahadade. Right? Because we say, right, that the quantities are not in exact proportion to one another. Okay? For food tuma versus the size for body tuma. The Tanya Kama Shi'ur Chatzi Pras. Why? Because we say, right, that the quantity is half a pras, half a loaf. Okay, so that's the minimum. Okay, in the same. Shnei betzim chaser kim'a. We say that that's basically 2 eggs. Okay, minus a little bit. Right? Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shnei Beitzim Sochakot. We call those jumbo eggs, right? Rabbi Yossi, then we would say 2 large eggs. She'er Rabbi Shnei Beitzim Va'od. And Rabbi, when he did a measurement, he said it was 2 eggs plus a little bit more. Kama Va'od. And how much is a little bit more? Echad me'esrim b'beitza. 1/20 of another egg. Ve'ilu gabe tum'at ochlin. But in regards to tuma of food, Tanya Rabbi Natan v'Rabbi Dusa. The two of them said, Amru kabeitza, when they said it was an egg's amount, she'amru kamoha ukeklipata. We said that included the egg and its shell. The Chachamim omrim kamoha below klipata. But the sages said Okay, that was the egg without its shell. Okay, and we're going to stop right there. Okay, because now the Gemara then is going to pick up to discuss a little more detail on the question of Tumas Ochlin, right? A little different topic. Okay, so wish everybody a good Shabbos, right? And stay well, everybody.